In this video, which is the 9th in my series on how to write a 3D space shooter game in Unity, we add the ability to damage and blow up the enemy ship. I've also reorganized the product to remove dependencies on third-party asset packages to make the code more shareable. So grab your favorite beverage, pull up a chair, and follow along as we write a 3D space shooter game in Unity. So it's time to start adding the ability to shoot at, deal damage to, and eventually blow up the enemy ship. But before I do that, I first want to demonstrate some of the changes that I've made since the last video to clean up this project. If you tried to pull down the code from GitHub, you probably ran into the problem of broken prefabs, where I'm referencing assets from the asset store, which I did not include in the project. So basically, I've taken everything from those assets that I need to be able to build and run this program, and I've included them in the project. So things for the explosions, for the ships, for the asteroids. One thing I did is the mesh for these asteroids were so big that it was bigger than I was allowed to commit to my Git repo. So I pulled them into Blender and I used the decimate modifier to make them a quarter of the size of what they were. And I really don't think the quality suffered that much from it. I also removed all the Odin attributes, even though the Odin attributes are extremely helpful to me and I think it's really powerful. It just didn't make sense to include a dependency on Odin in code that I'm sharing publicly. So you should be able to now grab this code from GitHub, build it, and run it with no problems. So now, on to adding damage to our fighter. I want to point out something that, in one hand, is very, very cool, but on the other hand, makes life a little bit more difficult for us in terms of how we apply damage. These ships are totally modular. So you've got a cockpit, you've got the engines separate, you've got their main body sections, wings, the rocket launchers, the blasters. These are all individual components. And if you look at the parent fighter, you'll see it does not have a collider. The individual components are where the colliders live. Now, that's cool in the sense that we can have these individual components take damage, so we can actually make it so the engines become less efficient, or they produce less thrust as they take damage and eventually can be completely disabled. So you can have a tactical flavor to this game where you can target the enemy's engines or target his weapons. That's cool. However, it does make applying damage to the parent ship a little bit more tricky because we're going to have to propagate the damage up from these individual components. Now, I could add a collider to this parent and have it implement the iDamageable interface and have it take damage directly, but I really like the idea of the individual components taking damage. And the way that Unity handles collisions, even though the collider is on this child component, it will search up the hierarchy to find a rigid body to register the collision for. So I could put an on collision enter on this. In fact, I'll go ahead and do that just for the sake of demonstration. Come in here and say on collision enter. And I will do a debug log. And I will say gameObject.name collided with collision.collider.name. Now if we go back out into Unity, oh, and before it can register any collisions, we need to put it on the enemy layer. You'll notice it's currently on the default layer. So I'm going to go ahead and move that to the enemy layer. And as you recall, in our game settings, we have in our physics collision matrix, we have it so the player projectile will collide with the enemy layer. I'm going to go ahead and apply all these things to the prefab. So we go ahead and hit play, and I start shooting. And oh, I forgot to say that I added a new script to the fighter. Let me turn that off. His AI ship movement controls, he's tracking this target. That target now has a random target mover. which just randomly positions that target to a position within a radius. And it does it every 5 seconds in this case. I'm just going to turn the movement controls off so that he's not flying away from us. And while I'm at it, I'm going to turn the asteroid field off. So as I start shooting at the ship, you should see the projectiles hit him, and we should log out those collisions. So if we go look at our console, projectile collider, also the projectile is logging it out, but also the fighter is logging that out. I'm going to go into this script. I'm going to get rid of these log messages. Don't need them anymore. So there, we can prove, I've proven that the ship controller can receive collisions, but that's not the way we want to do this. What we want to do is we want to have the individual components register their collisions, and we want to propagate that damage up to the parent. And we may want to propagate it up to multiple parents. So the collider is on this object here. So this is where we're going to want to add our damageable, but I want to create a new component for that. So let's go into our project and go into our scripts. I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this Ship Systems. I'll probably move some things in there from other folders, like the shields and so forth. But for now, and the engines probably should go in there. But for now, I'm going to create a new C# script. I'm going to call this DamageDelegator. Could call it DamagePropagator, but Delegator works. I will double click that. Get rid of this boilerplate. Get rid of these unreferenced using statements, and we are going to implement damageable, and we will implement the take damage method from the damageable interface. Now we're going to want a serialized field that will be an array of game objects, and I will call this damage delegates, and then I will have a list of damageable, which I will call damage receivers. All right. And in our awake method, we will cache those damage receivers. So first I want to say if damage delegates is null, just return. Don't want any null reference exceptions if I forget to assign those damage delegates. Then I will do a for each for each game object delegate in, actually I don't want to use that because that's a keyword, damage delegate in damage delegates, and I will say if damage delegate.try get component. And I always like to specify the type, even though it's not strictly necessary. And I will say out var damageable. Damageable. So if I'm able to find a damageable component on that game object, then the other thing I want to do here is I want to instantiate that list. Damage receivers equals new list of damageable. Damage receivers dot add damageable. Yes. This will populate our list of damage receivers. And then in take damage, I will say if damage receivers is not equal to null, or actually if it equals null, I will return. If you've followed my channel, you know I'm a big fan of early exit guard clauses. All right, so I will say for each damageable in damage receivers damageable take damage hit position. This will propagate the damage up to any parent. I wonder what that's about. All right. Okay, so that will propagate the damage to our damage receivers. All right, so if we go back into Unity, I want to create another script in here. DamageHandler. And this will also implement iDamageable. And I want to add another using statement here, Unity engine dot Unity events. Is that right? I want to have a public, actually a private Unity event health changed event. Oh, Unity engine.events. All right. And I'm going to have a public Unity event health changed. And then in our getter, I will say if health changed event is null, then we will instantiate that. And Ryder's going to suggest something really cool here. First of all, it's saying I can make this into a compound, or I can use a null-interpolator operator. And then it's going to further recommend that I use an expression body property. And then it will further say to use a null coalescing compound assignment. So now I just have an expression body method that will, if this is null, allocate a new one and then return it. Otherwise, it will just return it. Kind of cool. One line. This will give me a health changed event, Unity event, and it will allocate it if it isn't already allocated. And I'm going to do the same thing for object destroyed event. And we'll make a public Unity event object destroyed expression body method object destroyed event new Unity event. Cool. So in take damage, oh, we need some variables here. Let's add max health and health, and we will add an init method. I hate when Unity does, or when the editor does that. All right, so the init will take an int max health, and I will say health equals max health equals max health, and I will call health change dot invoke. All right, so take damage, I will say health minus equals damage, and if health is less than 0, then I will call object destroyed invoke. Well, first I'll go ahead and call health change invoke. Now, I think it would be cool if this guy had an explosion prefab. Actually, I can just do this. Ryder is also a fan of early exit guard clauses. All right, so we'll decrement the health, invoke the health changed event. If the health is greater than or equal to 0, actually we just want if it's greater than 0. If it's greater than 0, we will return. Otherwise, we'll spawn an explosion prefab if we have one, and invoke the object destroyed event. Cool. So I'm going to come up to our Unity editor, and on our escort fighter, I'm going to add the damage handler. And for the explosion prefab, we will drag detonator insanity. Now, I do want to go into the ship data for this guy. And I want to make his max health something smaller, just to make it easier to blow him up quicker. I really miss being able to edit all this stuff within here, but by getting rid of my Odin attributes, I no longer have the inline editor. All right, so what do we want to do? We got a gazillion colliders on this escort fighter. So the easiest way to do this would be to go into our ship prefab and filter by collider, select all of these, and add component DamageDelegator. And then drag in our escort fighter. And ultimately, down the future, we can also, if we want this guy to deal damage to the engine, we could add a damage handler to the engine, and then add that as an extra damage delegate here. And I could do that for all the other components as well. But back into the ShipController, we want to add a variable here for DamageHandler. And in our awake method, DamageHandler equals get component DamageHandler. And in our start method, actually I'm going to do this in onEnable. In our onEnable method, if DamageHandler equals null, return. Otherwise, DamageHandler.init ship data max health. DamageHandler health changed, add listener, on health changed. And DamageHandler object destroyed, add listener, on ship destroyed. I'm just going to call it destroy ship. Okay. Create method. Create method. And I want to put both of these below our callbacks. No, not that one. There we go. All right, I want to move these guys. So, destroy ship, I'm just going to say game object set active false. On health changed, I'm not going to do anything except debug log game object name health is damage handler. Oh, I need to expose those. So let me do this instead. I'm going to rename this to max health. And then I'm going to make this a public getter with a private, with a private setter. All right, back into our ship. Oh, I want to go into the script, actually. So down at the bottom where we have our compilation errors, I want to say DamageHandler dot health slash DamageHandler max health. All right. Start shooting that puppy. So we go look at our console log. So the first time we took damage, you see our health went 900, 800, 700, 600, 500, all the way down, and then boom, we blew up the ship. So we've got our ship taking damage, and we can blow them up. Cool. I think I want to add a health bar to the ship. To add a health bar, I will go up to my fighter, and I will go to UI canvas. And I'm going to call this health bar. And let's see, I want this to be world space. I don't think, I do want to scale it down. I want to zero this all out. And I want to scale this down. And I want the layer to be UI. All right. And now go into our project and create a new folder. Call it sprites. And I have an image I can use for this. It is just a tiny little white box. Oh, I thought I grabbed it. There we go. And we'll make this a sprite, and we'll make it 4 pixels per unit, and doesn't need to be anywhere near that big. Apply. So up here, let's create under UI an image, and I will call this background, and we'll drag in our health bar. And then we'll make it not quite black. I want it to stand out a little bit from the space background. I do want it to be dark. And we need to resize this. First of all, let me grab this and pull it up. Am I centered on this ship? Yeah. Okay, so we will pull that up. Oops. I want to kind of look straight on a little bit. All right, now this guy needs to be a lot bigger. So let me do something like 20 by 3. I may play with that later, but that's probably good for now. And let's duplicate this. And I'm going to call this foreground. And we'll make this one, I want him to be, hopefully he'll show up in front of the other one. I want his image type to be filled, horizontal, and I want him to be a reddish color. And if we adjust the slider, you can see that that is having the desired effect. Okay, that's probably all pretty good. So now we need to create a script for this guy. Oh, I want to create a prefab for him. So go up to our prefabs folder, ship systems, and I will drag that health bar into there. All right, now what do we want to do? We're going to create a script under ship systems, and I'm going to call this health bar. And I will open that up in Unity. And I'll get rid of all this boilerplate. Don't want it. We are going to be adding some other using directives in here because we're going to want UnityEngine.ui, for instance. Let's see. Serialized field. We want to have a reference to our sprite. health bar image. And we're going to want to have a floating point value update rate. Basically, this is going to determine how fast I change the value of the slider. And I want to have a serialized field for our damage handler. Okay, I'm going to cache a few things. I'm going to cache our transform. I'm going to cache the camera. Actually, I'll probably have to refactor this because as I think about it, our camera, we're using Cinemachine virtual cameras, and we have different ones. We have a cockpit camera, we have a follow camera, and depending on which camera we have, we're going to want to rotate this health bar to face that particular camera. And I think if we just go toward the main camera, then that might not be correct depending on where we are in the universe. But I'll deal with that later. We want to have a floating point value, which is our target fill amount. Okay, so in the awake method, we want to cache our transform. We want to cache the camera. And again, I'll probably add something here. I have to modify my camera manager to give me the current active camera. But again, I can do that later. And then if I have a damage handler, actually I'll say if damage handler is null, return. Man, I'm just having trouble typing. Okay. Otherwise, let's see, I want to set my target fill amount to be 1. That's probably good. And then I will call update health bar. I probably don't need to do this because I will calculate that in here. Create method. So in update health bar, there's a few things I want to do first. I want to have an on enable. Let's see, on enable. I'm going to want to subscribe. Well, first of all, if damage handler equals null, return. Otherwise, damage handler dot health changed, add listener, update health bar, and then on disable, I'll remove this listener. All right. So an update health bar, if damage handler equals null, return. If the damage handler's health equals 0, then I'll set our target fill amount to be 0. Okay. And I'll return. Okay, otherwise, target fill amount will equal float damage handler dot health divided by damage handler dot max health. That'll give me a percentage for the fill amount. And we want to render all of this in late update. Okay, so we will say, first of all, we want to look at our camera. And again, this will probably change to whatever the active camera is. But for now, we're just looking at the main camera. We'll say if damage handler equals null, or our health bar image is null, then we will just return. And then finally, if mathf approximately health bar image dot fill amount is approximately equal to the target fill amount, then we will just return. So no need to update anything. Otherwise, health bar image fill amount will equal mathf.move towards. We'll start with the current fill amount, moving towards target fill amount, and we'll use update speed, update rate times time.delta time. So that should smoothly adjust the health bar to its new value when we take damage. All right. I think all of that looks good. Let's go back into Unity and take this health bar game object, minimize all this junk. We will drag on our health bar script. We'll drag in our sprite for the foreground. And then for our damage handler, we'll just take our fighter. Now, as we shoot him, we should see that health bar decrease. And it is. And it should blow up soon. Very, very nice. Okay, so we got a health bar, and it is adjusting as we shoot it, and then the ship is blowing up. Very cool. So I think that about wraps things up for this video. We made some pretty good progress. We got the ability to shoot at and damage the enemy ship and blow it up. We added a health bar to give us an indication of how much damage more it can take before it blows up. And we abstracted things pretty well through interfaces, which I think is pretty cool. We took a look at all the different child components on the ship and how they can pass the damage up the hierarchy to the parent. And I think one thing we'd like to do in a future video is have some of those child components take damage themselves. So the engines, for instance, can take damage and eventually be disabled. I think that'd be pretty cool. Also, I want to add the ability to have the ship shoot back. We need to get that AI working just to make it more of a fun game, of course. And in order for that to be really playable, I think we need to have some kind of a radar system or some kind of a waypoint indicating system that would give you a visual indication on your HUD as to which direction the enemy is when it's off screen. Otherwise, it can be really hard to locate and get back on target. We want to eventually add some seeking weapons, some guided missiles. I think that'd be pretty cool. And if I think about that, maybe some kind of countermeasures like chaff or flares. Man, there's just so many things that we could add to this game. I want to hear what you want. Drop me a comment. Let me know what you'd like to see in the next video, and I'll take that into consideration. If there's anything in particular you'd like me to focus on, I definitely want to take that into account. And do me a favor, click that like and subscribe button. It really does help to grow my channel, and I really want to get this content in front of as many people as possible. And your liking and subscribing really does help the algorithm and get YouTube to show it to other people. So, hopefully you found this video helpful, and I really do appreciate you tuning in. Thanks for watching, and good luck on your game development journey.